I'm used to sitting over there. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Environment Sustainability Committee meeting, Friday, May 16th. Called order. Any declarations of conflict of interest?
Nope.
Seeing none. Approval of the agenda. Councillor Beck, seconded by Councillor Twill. Approval of minutes from April 30th, 2025. Moved by Councillor Beck, seconded by Councillor Twill. Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes? No. Seeing none, moving right along. Going to reports and discussions. 6A, new transit bus purchase. Environment Sustainability 25-19. Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report speaks to the purchase of new diesel buses for our transit system and follows a recent report that was approved by Council this week for an order to arrive in March of 2026. This order is for December of 2026 and is part of our ISIP funding work where the federal and provincial governments contribute along with the municipality. So the recommendation is that Council approve the purchase and December 2026 delivery of 6 new diesel transit buses from Nova Bus for $5.5 million and change before tax. And this was out for public tender, and we received 2 submissions, one from Nova Bus and one from New Flyer. Myself and our Public Works Superintendent that's responsible for fleet reviewed the submissions and scored the submissions. And the scores are in the report, but it evaluated the experience and qualifications of the company, their ability to meet the specifications that we need, the price, and their environmental and sustainability commitments. And the total scores were 88.5 for Nova Bus and 85 for New Flyer. So given that, our recommendation is to make the award to Nova Bus. And I will just add that this is conditional upon the federal government signing a form permitting us to move from the transit depot to this bus purchase. We expected that months ago, but with the federal election, they were delayed in signing that paperwork. We don't anticipate this being a problem. The province seems supportive of the shift, and they already signed off on one scope change, as you know, which was the project you approved this week. So the ISIP projects are in little separate pots of money. So they have already approved the scope change to move from electric to diesel in one instance already. So this is the second approval. And I think I'll leave it at that and answer any questions.
Thank you. So when we purchase these 6 buses, will that put us on track with, keeping on track with the replacement of the older buses? And
Yes, so the majority of these buses are for replacing aged fleet. We have a lot of old buses on the road that are past expiry. And Anna, correct me, do any of these add to fleet expansion? Anna does our fleet planning more than I do.
Yes, so of these 6 buses, these will replace the last 2 buses that are operating beyond the end of their useful life, and it will contribute to a growth of 4 new buses in our net fleet, which will allow the system to, like there are some fleet expansions or operational expansions that we want to do that we're currently not able to do at peak hour. And so with the growth of 4 buses in the fleet, we'll be able to offer more peak hour services in more parts of the city.
okay. Another question. Operator and maintenance training, if we just purchased 4 buses from this company, why do we have to pay again? It's the same buses, same company. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question. We had to compare apples to apples when we reviewed the pricing. So if New Flyer came out on top, because we don't have their buses, we would have to pay for tools and training. So we had to compare those prices with each other. So with New Flyer, that price is the highest upset limit. We will probably spend less than that because we will not require all of the training. We will not require all of the tools that they listed. But that is what was provided in their quote. And again, we had to compare their cost of tools with New Flyer cost of tools to compare apples to apples. But we will not, if we go with New Flyer as we recommend, we will not need all that training if we proceed with Nova Bus as recommended, we won't need all the tools or all the training that's listed.
Okay. And one more quick question. If this gets approved to go to council, when do you anticipate the funding signature signing over from will that be done before it gets to council, or do you have a date for that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we expected to hear back before now. And the last word was that they're working towards the end of this month. And so that would be before the next council meeting is the goal.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I do, yeah.
Councilor Beck?
It looked like we were, to use your Apple analogy, we were comparing Honeycrisps to Honeycrisps by the looks of this, that they were very close in that both the bids seemed to be very worthy, and in the end, I mean, not a big price difference. Score is pretty close, so that's, I guess, reassuring that there's a couple of options out there that exist. I kind of, it might have get answered just in that last part. I did have a question about the specialty tools piece. One was listed at 72,000, one was 323,000. So is it lower with the Nova because we already have a lot of those tools and they're not required? Is that the idea? Did I understand that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So to your first point, yes, New Flyer and Nova Bus are the two big reputable transit bus providers of full-size 40-foot buses. So not surprising to see two good submissions. And the specialty tools, basically that was an open-ended question to them. Provide us with pricing and lists of the tools required to do maintenance on these buses. And what New Flyer provided was as listed, what Nova Bus provided was as listed. So no, that doesn't take into account the fact that we might already have some of these tools. That's
Okay.
their complete lists.
Okay. And you're comfortable with because it's quite a discrepancy, $250,000, and you're comfortable with what's, they're providing all the specialty tools that we need?
Yes.
You're good with that?
Yeah.
I did have a second question, Chair, if you don't mind. Just looking at the scoring, Nova Bus came in under the environment and sustainability. I recognize it's only worth 5 points, but what was the I wouldn't say concern, a relative concern about the lower score for Nova on the environment sustainability side? What was missing from there?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair. So they both did a fabulous job at answering that question. And if you wanted to take the time to look at the submissions, I think you'd be impressed. They both had pages and pages of their commitments to their socially and corporate values, environmental sustainability commitments.
Okay.
So those scores are both really good. The reason New Flyer scored slightly higher there is we had a list of things that we scored them on. So check boxes,
Yeah.
Hazardous waste management, Indigenous reconciliation, equity, diversity, inclusion, and we had the list. And so New Flyer, we went through the list and they answered every single thing that we
Right.
asked. And Nova Bus, I think there was a part around Indigenous reconciliation that they didn't really speak to, so then they got slightly lower score.
Okay, all right. And just one final question, if you don't mind, Chair. In terms of, because our goal is to try and reduce our carbon footprint, be greener, all that sort of stuff. The sort of ultimate in that is total electrification. We're not there, but we are making inroads towards improving reducing our CO2 emissions and all that other good stuff. Can you speak just for a minute in terms of, you mentioned earlier about that we've got buses that are literally hanging on their last threads of tires, and cross our fingers that we can get through to December 2026 with them. But can you, just kind of in a quick nutshell, sort of talk about the environmental benefits that will come with these new buses, with these new kinds of diesel buses? Although they are diesel, they're not electric, and maybe just speak to what kind of benefits they will yield. Maybe in not just the buses themselves, but maybe in the overall bigger picture in terms of route expansion, that sort of thing.
Sure, I can start and through you, Mr. Chair, and Anna can jump in because she did a lot of work on this. So we presented to council a few months ago the recommendation to pivot from electrification to diesel. And through the work that Anna did was to analyze the environmental impact of one versus the other.
Yeah.
And they came out quite similar, and one a lot more affordable than the other. So this path, buying diesel buses, while you don't have the electric buses reducing emissions, you do allow for greater fleet numbers, more people on a bus, more service, and getting people out of single passenger private vehicles and getting more people on buses has greenhouse gas savings. So it's kind of looking at it, one way you have more buses, more service, more people out of cars, and one way you have the same service, same number of buses, but they're greener buses.
Yep.
And the greenhouse gas emissions were similar.
Anna?
Yeah, I think Jessica has summarized that quite well. When the decision was made to pivot away from the electric facility, largely due to the increase in budget above what we had funding available for, I ran a couple of different scenarios, and the saving in emissions to make it roughly equivalent to electrification with a set number of fleet, it does require us to have the ambition to invest in more diesel buses to drive the ridership. So if I pull up the numbers that I did at the time, our ridership is currently approximately 1.5 million people or trips per year.
Yep.
So that displaces roughly 1,600 tons of CO2 per year. And we know that we have a certain amount of emissions from our diesel fleet. The net saving comes out to little less than 500 tons of CO2 per year from our current system. And if we went electric, we would have a smaller fleet compared to having a larger diesel fleet. And so it's just ultimately, we end up with ridership of either 3 million or closer to 4 million
Right.
after 10 years. And it's that displacement away from car trips that brings the savings. Basically,
Right.
if you have 5 people on a bus, then
Carbon
it
neutral?
is carbon neutral. More than 5 people on a bus, you're saving emissions compared
Right.
to having them driving.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's a good way of looking at it. Thank you.
All right,
I'm ready to move that on
all
if,
good news. Moved by Councillor Beck, seconded by Councillor Twill, so it's off to council. 6B, Anna, award of lease of right-of-way for e-scooters.
Yeah, thank you. So the purpose of this report is to inform council of the results of the request for expressions of interest for lease of areas in the city right-of-way for e-scooter rentals, and to recommend award to Epic Electric Scooters for 18 locations. In past years, Epic Electric has rented these same 18 locations in the public right-of-way after discussions with Public Works. I think we all have an ambition and an intention to develop a bylaw to better regulate micro-mobility in the city, so e-scooter rental fleets and also bike rental fleets, and work has been done to make progress towards that bylaw. But in the interim, the agreement to lease these 18 sites again, it was judged that this needed to be, and it was a council decision that this needed to be an open process to allow a competitive process. So the request for expression of interest was issued. There was only one response from Epic Electric Scooters. They detailed in that expression of interest the 18 locations, which have already been reviewed by Public Works, the rental rate per season that they were willing to pay. They outlined operating conditions for safety and public order, how they would encourage riders to meet, for example, the provincial helmet requirements, and they outlined their experience in the micromobility sector. So the proposal was reviewed by myself, Jessica, and Mike Roos here, and collectively we recommended that the lease agreement be signed for 1 year, annually renewable for up to a further 2 years. And it's important to note that this decision is not about allowing the company to exist and operate or not. It's merely about whether they have access to 18 locations in the public right-of-way from which they can conduct their business. They do have agreements with other private landowners for their scooter parking, and otherwise they operate in compliance with provincial law. So that's it.
Thank you. So will this be in competition with the other two scooter rentals in Charlottetown? TAF's and there's another one. This is TAF? Okay, sorry. Okay, I didn't see the name TAF, so my apologies. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Twill?
Yeah, thank you for your report. There's no secret, there's a lot of concerns about the scooters in terms of how they navigate around the city. I don't want to stereotype them all, but nonetheless, it is a concern. For example, today we got a copy from our communications people. We're sending out an email to like the scooters, cyclists and whatever, to stay off the boardwalk. I think there has to be, I don't know if you want to use the word enforcement, but we have to have some type of observation or checkpoints as to once approval is given, it's not just, okay, now it's go ahead and do what you want. I know some of them do follow, what they're enabled to do, but we've had some very close calls in the last couple of years. I would even suggest it's dangerous. It's more dangerous for the people riding the scooters. So glad to see that helmets are a prerequisite. I think that has to be enforced because, my good friend Kenny Murnion reminds me of that on a very, not only a seasonal basis, but on a daily basis. So when this contract is signed, I think you got to make it clear that you just don't get the contract and then, we'll look at it again next year. There's got to be checks and balances. So I don't know who does that. Is that police? Is that our own in-house staff that do that? Because we have to make sure they're not on the sidewalks, they're not on the boardwalks, they're not interfering with seniors that are out, in their daily routine, having a walk. And it just can't be going up the street the wrong way or whatever the case may be. And again, I don't want to stereotype them all because that's unfair. But I'm concerned about their safety. I really am, because we don't want to see anyone get hurt.
Thank you, Councillor Twill. And we had TAF come in and do a presentation to us, and he has a software on his scooters that they can disable them. So if the scooter gets close to the boardwalk, it gets shut down. If it goes on sidewalks, they get shut down. Now, that doesn't eliminate every sidewalk, not saying that he can't do it, but the boardwalk is one area that he stressed that they will not allowed to get on because the scooter just shuts down. It is a policing issue for sure if they're going the wrong way on the street, but it's hard to enforce. As Chief McConnell had, he talked to us about that. But if you guys have anything to add, Mike?
Thanks. Through the chair, those all great questions and something that we've been chatting about internally for quite some time. As the chair mentioned, the proponent that we're discussing here today has the ability through their software to geofence, so basically lock off areas where the e-scooters would not be able to operate. Now, obviously, that only covers off the e-scooters that are owned and operated by this company. That wouldn't cover off any privately owned e-scooters, which, as we know, are a growing mode of transportation in the community. But there are some checks and balances that we're exploring and continuing to explore with this proponent for this licensing agreement. And in addition, I would note too that Anna and Jessica and team have been working very closely with a group of Dallas students in exploring more micromobility options and what effectively regulatory intervention could look like, and bringing forward some recommendations on how we can more effectively manage these new and emerging transportation options in the community. The group has done some really great work in concert with WSP, the company that was brought in to do the AT strategy and parking strategy. So we've got some great information that will be coming forward in the future to council for consideration.
Follow-up, thank you. Now I'll get even a little more specific. In terms of liability, so what are the regulations when it comes to insurance, and what is there potential for the city to, well, I would think the city would be held liable because it is the city's right-of-way that these scooters are traveling on. So have any of those issues been flushed out in the agreement in terms of liability, in terms of insurance? Who's accountable, who's not accountable, who's responsible to ensure that all of the prereqs are followed? Because as I said earlier, I'm afraid, for some of these people that are renting, I mean, they just get on, some of them just get on these scooters and they're gone. Like there's no boundaries. They're just gone. And, probably if I was younger, I'd probably be doing the same thing. So I'm just concerned about all of those things. It's part of making the city safe, and I'm very concerned about their safety as well.
I'd like to see you on a scooter, Mr. Tweel. Council should get out. Liabilities, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but if they're on our right-of-ways, using our right-of-ways, but that doesn't put us in a situation that we have to pay insurance. It's just like any car going down the road. If they get in an accident, they can't sue the city because we provided the road. TAF, when he was in here, did explain, and you probably have the numbers, the liability coverage that he carries for this. So, and maybe you have the numbers, Mike, if you go ahead. And his mic is on first.
Anna has some of the specifics, but just in addition to what you've mentioned, as part of the selection process, there was a requirement to provide an adequate insurance policy to meet our needs. In addition, with the actual license agreement, assuming that council agrees to award this license to the operator, there's conditions in the license agreement that they carry an appropriate insurance policy with the city as a named additional insured party.
Anna, follow up, 1 second. She just wanted to add to that. Hold on, Mitch. Councillor Tweel, sorry.
Okay, so yeah, through you, Chair, it's, it does include commercial general liability, property insurance, automobile liability insurance, workers' compensation coverage, and listing the city as an additional insured. Part of the license agreement is also going to include that the operator remain in regular communication with the city. I did meet with TAF. I'm going to remain as his point person for overseeing, this agreement. And it's going to include that we work together to ensure that, concerns are addressed about, helmet usage as they arise. I actually went out for a test ride on the scooters the other day, and I have some suggestions on how the software can be improved to increase helmet uptake, and I think that's a high priority. And we're also going to be requiring that they provide incident reports when they occur to the city so that we have a copy of those. I recently discussed an incident that I heard about from a resident, and it was, the user rather than the company. The user was not following the rules, and as a result, that user has now been banned from renting scooters for the foreseeable future. And so the operator does recognize that, having misbehavior within his customer base is a negative for his reputation as a business. And so he is very proactive about trying to address those and encourage higher rates of compliance.
Sorry, just to follow up to hers and then I'll come to you. So how can you ban somebody because coming in, it's run by, scooters are all over the city, and you tap your credit card to start. So how do they actually ban somebody from being on their scooters?
So they, like there's a customer account that's associated with that credit card, and that credit card and any associated credit cards owned by the same person with the same name can be removed. And they have a number of, I think they have a list of people who they have already banned in a small number of cases for misbehavior, but they also ban credit cards for attempted fraud or those sorts of things. So they do have a way of excluding certain users.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Councillor Twill, sorry, and then
Yeah.
Councillor Beck.
Michael, did you say that the city also has insurance? Did I misinterpret that?
Through the chair, so the city does have a general liability insurance policy, but in this instance where we're entering into a license agreement, we're asking that the operator carry an insurance policy of their own, naming the city as additional insured, so that the city's covered if anything happened with their operation.
Okay, so the onus is on the service provider.
That's
It's not on the city.
correct.
No, and again, I just want to reiterate, my good friend Kenny Murnion, who's made this his lifelong passion, about helmets, he gives it to me pretty good, and he has over the last couple of years, not just with the scooters, but, people riding their bicycles. I think it's very important, and I don't know if it's through this committee, this department, but we've got police, joint effort, describe it whatever way you want, but we really gotta stress the importance of wearing helmets. I can't emphasize that enough.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the Dell students for a minute. I remember when I attended the open house, I got the opportunity to talk with them about their work that they were doing, and I couldn't believe the level of excitement that they had because if I understood it correctly, it's part of their final thesis or final major project that they have to do. So it's a great example of using, like, giving real-world experience to our post-secondary institutions and that collaboration. I love seeing stuff like that. And I really love seeing the genuine enthusiasm that they had for it. Like you talk about heightening engagement. Of course, I'm looking at it from a former principal's lens, but I thought that was really, really great to see, and I look forward to seeing what their final project actually looks like. Just a question. So we have Epic scooters. How many other scooter rentals do we know of that are existing in Charlottetown? I asked this I'm going to have a follow-up to that in a second, but how many other companies do we have that we know of?
Through you, Chair, I'm actually only aware of Epic, but you've just mentioned another. There's
I think there was another one considering it last year, and I don't know if they ended up going or not.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of any others either. That's why I'm just asking the question here today.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any others. There are some cities around the world that will put out license agreements, and they'll have the intention to select a single operator if they have a bylaw. And then there are other cities that will have a maximum number of scooters, and then that can be divided up through a number of different companies. So I think those are interesting discussions that we can get to when we are at the point of developing a bylaw. But for today's report, it's just focused on the lease of the 18 locations.
Okay, so they'll be the only one, Epic Scooters will be the only one accessing the public right-of-ways that we have designated for that usage.
Yes, for scooter parking. Of
For
course.
scooter parking,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So, to Councillor McKinnon's comment, I'm going back to Victoria Park just because there were some observations made of people scooting in Victoria Park. So, for whatever reason, the disabling had been disabled, or that whatever the word, where it blocks it off in terms of the dead zones, whatever we want to call it. So, I don't know how to. I guess what I'd like to know, I guess there's a few things. When I was looking at the report, because we do get questions about this, right? People see them going around without the helmet, or, kids going over, doing jumps over the cylinder blocks in the street and things like that. Well, I've seen it. People have seen it. We all know what the incidents are. But in terms of the conditions, I'm on page 9. Can we so that we understand what are the conditions, and the last line there said, with lease agreement including operation conditions that East Kendall rental companies who wish to use public lands must abide by. Do we have a outline of that, or can we receive what that looks like, just so people understand what those conditions are? And the other part I'd like to know is, where are our 18 locations? So if we're seeing them in an area, if they're being dumped in an area, I think for me, I'd like to know that, just to have an understanding, and I think that would be good for council to know too, so that if they do get any kind of questions, they at least have an idea of what the operating conditions are, what are the no-go zones, Victoria Park, what are the other areas that they've got it GPS restricted? I think that'd be good information for us to know, and I think, in fairness, I think we're clearly demonstrating that we want to work with Epic Scooters, and we want this to work, and we're trying, in the absence of a formal policy, trying to find some middle ground or some workable policy in the interim. So I applaud that, and I want to continue to do that. But I think in order for council to understand, because they're probably going to get concerns and comments and questions this year, it'd be good to have a little bit of a understanding. If you want to know, okay, is it in accordance with the operating conditions, or is it not? Are they in areas where they should be, or are they not? And I think that would be good information. I know I'd like to have that, and I think it'd be good for all the council to have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. No, and I agree with what your comment there. Nice to have the locations, but it'd be also curious, some of the complaints that we're getting, would be nice to know, is it one of those green Epic scooters, or is it a black private one that's going down through Victoria Park? 'Cause he was pretty adamant saying that he had it blocked out, so no doubt that there is scooters.
Very well could be.
Yeah, and we can't control the private ones, unfortunately. Anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I would be, I think if it's appropriate, we do have the draft of the lease agreement. I'm just sort of putting final touches on it to add and include those conditions. And so if it's appropriate, I think it could be included in the report to council. So, yeah. And it can have, you can download the Epic Electric Scooters app, and you can see the areas that are red zoned. And yeah, we can talk about, I'm happy to answer any sort of detailed operational questions as they arise throughout the year as well.
I would maybe just add to, regarding helmet usage and some of these other issues that council has been getting complaints about. When it comes to enforcement of conditions or bylaws or what have you, usually our best option is always trying to do more public education, because we rely on the public to abide by the rules set out by council, and if we make sure that that information is available to them, and that it's front and center, that these are the expectations when you're operating these scooters, riding a bike, crossing the road, it's more likely that they will follow those rules. So I would say our best investment at this point is doing more on the public education side, and then if we need to escalate into further enforcement mechanisms, we can certainly look at additional options.
Chair?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's all well and good, Mike, and I agree with it. The reality is that for the ones that are just going to completely ignore any rules or regulations or public education, whatever, I'm just going to do my own thing, and there are people who are doing that, and we've seen them. So I think there has to be an enforcement piece too. We can't just say, okay, we're going to leave it all to public education. There has to be some awareness that we're actually putting some teeth behind our policy, and we're actually concerned about it, like to Councillor Tweels. We're trying to provide safety. We're trying to remind people that, hey, listen, if you're going to do this, if we're going to grow mobility, we have to do it safely, and we have to do it with the understanding that there is a certain level of responsibility that comes with it. So I do agree with the education piece, but I think it has to be coupled with a bit of carrot and a bit of stick, maybe, if you will.
Through the chair, completely appreciate all those comments. I think we're, well, I think a lot of this conversation will be addressed and some of these questions will be addressed in the information to come from the grad students that we were talking about earlier. So there's some really great research that they put together for the city in consultation and collaboration with city staff. Anna's team has been great in working with them and mentoring them. They have completed a jurisdictional scan, making sure that they're trying to find some commonly used tools from other municipalities across the country. So I think that'll give us kind of that roadmap moving forward and give council some more options to consider in terms of further regulatory intervention, and maybe including a bylaw in the future.
Thank you. Have a mover to move this on to council? Two hands, Councillor Beck, and seconded by Councillor Twill. Lots of great discussion. Any new business? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Twill, seconded. Thank you very much, everyone.